Thank you to my patrons. Your generosity and commitment to my work is astonishing. I sincerely appreciate it. According to its critics, atheism is depressing and hopeless. Atheism lacks utility. Atheism is nihilistic and misery-inducing.
So truly, if God does not exist, human beings find themselves in a horrible predicament. Life is ultimately without significance, meaning, value, or purpose.
Atheism, specifically naturalistic atheism, is very, very sad.
That condition of being without Christ is described as having no hope and without God in the world.
Clearly, these charges are irrelevant to the existential questions. Is there an afterlife? Is there a God or gods? Is there any kind of supernatural and/or divine reality, etc.? In other words, it could be the case that 1. Atheism is true, and 2. Reality sucks. And if so, we're just going to have to get over it. After all, the universe doesn't owe us a sense of meaning, hope, and/or utility. But let's not be too hasty. Are these charges true in the first place? Does atheism inexorably lead to depression, hopelessness, nihilism, and misery? Does atheism lack utility? As already stated, these questions have nothing to do with the truth of the matter. Despite this, and due in no small part, I suspect, to the hedonism that underpins our psychology, these allegations still pervade our discourse. Rightly or wrongly, and no matter how epistemologically irrelevant, people appear to care very deeply about the utility of worldviews. Whether or not the view confers a sense of meaning, comfort, hope, and so on. For me, these questions are irrelevant. In the timeless words of atheist Matt Dillahunty, I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. Please notice that Matt didn't add an addendum wherein he said, unless the false thing gives me meaning, comfort, hope, and utility. I couldn't agree more with Matt. I would prefer to be hurt by the truth rather than comforted by a falsehood. So if indeed the critics of atheism are correct in their charges, if atheism really is depressing, nihilistic, and misery-inducing, so be it. It is what it is. Again, who said the universe owes us any comfort? Why would anyone have such a perverse expectation? That said, and counterintuitive though it might seem, especially after this preamble, I've become convinced that atheism isn't the vacuum of meaning and utility that its critics allege. Far from it. And here's why. To erect this defense, we must begin by acknowledging what atheism entails. For the purposes of this discussion, I shall define an atheist as someone who remains unconvinced in the existence of a god or gods. Please notice that this view, in and of itself, does not preclude all supernatural propositions. For example, it could be the case that there's no God, but the Buddhists are correct, and one is doomed to cycle the wheel of samsara for eternity until enlightenment is achieved. Suffice to say, not every supernatural proposition entails a God concept. In fact, one could be reasonably labelled an atheist whilst believing a whole host of supernatural nonsense: ghosts, psychics, mediums, reincarnation, etc. So in order to refine and delimit the discussion, I shall assume that the atheism in question is of the naturalistic variety. That is, those who remain unconvinced in the existence of any god or gods and simultaneously believe that any or all supernatural claims have failed to meet their burden of proof. With this in place, the implications are clear. The naturalist atheist viewpoint entails an arguably unpleasant view, particularly for a creature with foreknowledge of its own demise, particularly for a creature with self-awareness and a desire to remain alive. Think about it. If the naturalist atheist is correct, death is the end. Every thought, dream, hope, and desire is extinguished in the fullness of time. You will cease to exist. Your non-existence will persist for eternity. This fate also awaits everyone who you hold dear. And worse still, if your life on this petty planet has been less than ideal, there's no cosmic justice or second chances. If you spent your short time contending with the debilitating illness, enduring the grief of a child's passing, suffering at the hands of a brutal victimizer as so many have, that's it. That's your lot in life. To put it crudely, life's a bitch and then you're dead. So how can I defend this view? Where's the value? Where's the meaning? Where's the utility? Where's the comfort and hope? For starters, consider the nature of value and how we attribute it. The value is located in our minds. The truth is, we tend to value things based on rarity. The reason gold is perceived as more valuable than silver is because silver is more plentiful than gold. And while there are exceptions to every rule, I believe it's something of a truism to say that humans value things based on rarity. If gold were blossoming on every tree, if the fields were paved with gold instead of green, if gold droplets fell from the sky instead of rain, it's clear that said precious metal would lose its perceived value. For how could a jeweler charge extortionate amounts of money for something so widely available? But why do I bring this up? Consider the theistic proposition of an eternal afterlife. If true, one's existence on this mortal coil is but a nanosecond. Life on Earth is a waiting room for the great big gig in the sky. Doesn't this proposition diminish one's life in the here and now? Remember, we tend to value things based on rarity. So which of the following confers more value upon your life? 1. An infinite existence, a life without end, an eternity. Or 2. A life of 80 to 90 years, if you're lucky. Which of these options makes each and every moment more precious? Which of these options creates more urgency? Which of these options makes every last love, laugh, and connection matter more? It's clear to me that the naturalist atheist viewpoint is the winner here. For if eternity awaits, then life, like the gold that blossoms on the trees of the alternate reality, loses its value. How can I value my years if I have an infinite number of them? How can something for which there is no end be valued the same as or more than something finite? Theists may argue that this life has value insofar as it determines the quality of your afterlife. Life is about soul-making, so each and every moment is infused with eschatological and/or religious value and purpose. This is an interesting point that cannot be hand-waved away. In fact, I don't deny the possibility that religions can confer value upon your every waking moment. Remember, the purpose of this video essay is not to deny that the faithful have value in their lives. I grant that easily. I just wish that theists were more willing to grant the same in the opposite direction.
Life is ultimately without significance, meaning, value, or purpose.
Have I not articulated a fair case and foundation for value on a naturalist atheist worldview? Intuitive or not, and arguably, your life matters more on a naturalist atheist worldview. The fact that your years are numbered, the fact that death is the end, the fact that every next breath could be your last, adds value to your life. The finitude of life is what makes it precious. I hold my loved ones closely, and I savor each and every moment precisely because I'm an atheist, not in spite of it, much to the chagrin of apologists who would love for you to think otherwise. Simply put, if humans value things based on rarity, and we do, then what could be more valuable than that single perishable resource you call your life? Suffice to say, it's clear that naturalist atheism can confer a sense of meaning and value in your life. With only 80 to 90 years to play with before an eternal oblivion, again, if you're lucky, then each and every moment is precious, urgent, and important. What more can you ask for in terms of meaning, if not the feeling that each and every moment is precious, urgent, and infused with importance? Apologists would have us believe that atheism renders nothing but nihilism and misery, but can you not see that the opposite is true? It's the finitude of life that makes it special. There's no respawns, so we better do it right the first time. This fact also serves as the foundation for the psychological utility of naturalist atheism. To put it straightforwardly, it's hard not to feel a sense of urgency in relation to one's goals whilst staring down the barrel of oblivion and eternal non-existence. Truthfully, this is how I live my life. Every time I consider quitting YouTube, every time I consider skipping the gym, every time I consider throwing in the towel on a given undertaking, the thought occurs, I have one life without respawns, without restarts, without do-overs, and by quitting now, I'm robbing myself and my loved ones of a better future. You see, I can't afford to play fast and loose with my finite time on this planet. Nobody can. There's no good evidence for rebirth, so it's likely that I won't get a second chance to do all of this again. There's no good evidence for heaven, so again, it's likely that I won't get additional chances to make things right. As an atheist, it's clear to me that I have one shot, and I better not miss. What more could you ask for in terms of utility than the knowledge that you must accomplish your goals sooner rather than later? Useful people act with urgency. They're proactive and determined. They don't give up. I submit to you, dear listener, that naturalist atheism can create this drive within you, as it has in me. So with value, meaning, and utility addressed, what about comfort and hope? Is naturalist atheism devoid of comfort? Getting the obvious out of the way, there's no eschatological comfort, by definition. That said, I'm not convinced that death is something to be discomforted by. Dying is undoubtedly more or less unpleasant depending on the method of dispatch, but death itself doesn't strike me as anything to be fearful of. I wasn't worrying about anything 5,000 years ago, and I suspect that things will be the same 5,000 years from now. So I'm not convinced that naturalist atheism, or any worldview for that matter, requires an inbuilt inoculation against fear of death. Those who fear death appear to simply misunderstand what it is exactly. I've spoken with people who feared the possibility of floating in eternal darkness, but this view is as baseless as the heaven that theists assert. Upon death, the you that is will be no more. There will be no experience of an eternal darkness because there will be no experiencer, that is, you. Your consciousness will cease. So fears of eternal darkness are unfounded, or at the very least, that's what the evidence suggests. And non-existence is certainly nothing to be feared. You didn't exist for an eternity before you were born, and this didn't cause you any discomfort because you didn't exist. And so too it will be the case upon death. So on this point, what often gets marketed as a failure of naturalist atheism is actually based on a misunderstanding of what death is and what it likely constitutes. Properly understood, I think it's fair to say that death is a peaceful idea. But let's assume you disagree. Does religion do a better job here? Firstly, religion isn't all sunshine and roses vis-a-vis questions of death. Many theists believe that hellfire and torture awaits those who misbehave. This belief can be so real and so debilitating that people require counseling to overcome it, if they overcome it at all. So there's no automatic point in favor of faith here, as theists struggle with the paralyzing fear and anxiety pertaining to the possibility of eternal punishment. But don't take my word for it.
I saw this 30 years ago in my practice. I didn't know how to label it. Well, now I know how to label it. I know that when somebody comes to me complaining about fear of hell, I can't go to sleep at night because I wake up with fear of hell, I know that's probably religious trauma. Yeah, we did a survey of all of our therapists in the psychotherapy project, and not everybody responded, but what we did get gave us some interesting information. What we asked them was, considering all of your client base, not just the ones that come through us, all of your client base, how many people come in with complaints related to religious abuse, like being beaten for having been caught masturbating, or being grounded because you didn't learn your Bible verses, or being shamed for your body, or being gay, or there's any number of things. And we listed it before. And we asked what percentage of your clients come in with those. We call them adverse childhood experiences related to religion.
Right.
Adverse childhood experiences related to religion. 36% of the clients coming in to the people that responded, 36% have those complaints.
Yeah.
That's a third of all the people that walk into any of our therapists' offices.
A cursory Google reveals the sheer extent of religious trauma and the lives it's destroyed. As always, dear listener, you can be the judge. Universalists have attempted to solve this problem by suggesting that everyone goes to heaven. But I submit to you that it's quite discomforting to suppose that Adolf Hitler is enjoying eternity in paradise, just the same as the many millions of Holocaust victims that he's responsible for murdering. So no matter what way you cut it, the theistic answers surrounding death don't score an automatic point in favor of faith when it comes to questions of comfort. In fact, theists appear to suffer quite a lot precisely because of their theological commitments. I would argue that theists suffer in ways that not even atheists do. For example, when a good friend of mine was killed in a vehicular accident, his father, a man of faith, this being the second son he lost in tragic circumstances, said, and I quote, "I don't know why God put me on this earth at all." In other words, in addition to the brutal and incomprehensible pain of losing a child, this man was wrestling with a further complication. Why would God allow this? He might have thought to himself, I pray, I attend church, I do good. Furthermore, my child was good. He was innocent. God, why have you taken him from me? Whether or not theists have answers to these questions is beside the point. The crucial observation here is that religion compounded his grief as opposed to relieving it. The pain of his loss is unbearable, yet, in addition, he's having to deal with the anger and resentment he feels towards a God who allowed it to happen. Now, you might point out that other theists, contrary to my example, have derived comfort from their faith in times of tragedy and loss. And that's fine. I don't deny that possibility. I'm merely resisting the oft-granted assumption that religion automatically confers a sense of comfort in times of crisis. My example demonstrates that this isn't always the case. Religion can compound grief. But does an atheist fare any better in this circumstance? Well, as misfortune would have it, my family recently endured the loss of a loved one. Like the aforementioned friend and so many other young men, this loved one met his end in a vehicular accident at the tender age of 19. Speaking as an atheist, I can tell you that the grief my family is undergoing is obscene. But at the very least, I can rest assured that what happened wasn't a feature of some divine plan. I don't have to torture myself with questions of why God, why? The indifference of the universe removes any and all inclinations to take it personally. I can deal with the grief on its own terms, unhindered by masturbatory theological considerations. In other words, if only by contrast, naturalist atheism could be a better bedfellow in times of grief than many people give it credit for. But what of justice? What can the naturalist atheist offer in this domain? Theists love to remind us that God is the ultimate judge. The buck stops with him. So even if someone gets away, God will hold them accountable in the fullness of time. I can certainly see the appeal of this view. Take the example of radio and television personality Jimmy Savile, a brutal sexual criminal and victimizer of children whose crimes only came to light after he died an old man in his bed of natural causes. What can the naturalist atheist offer in such situations? Must we capitulate with a whimpering, tough luck? Well, firstly, it's not clear to me that the theistic answer is particularly compelling here. After all, didn't Christ's death on the cross lead to the forgiveness of all of humanity? The predators and victimizers of children among them? Doesn't Christianity celebrate a human sacrifice as though it's an acceptable substitution for people taking personal responsibility for their own misdeeds? Doesn't Christianity teach us that forgiveness is possible so long as your redemption is genuine? Wouldn't that mean that Savile could be in heaven if his apology were sincere? None of this strikes me as particularly just, but leaving aside theological considerations of justice and whether or not they actually work, let me say the following in defense of the naturalist atheist position. Sure, the naturalist atheist must admit that miscarriages of justice are not only possible, but likely. There's always going to be those who evade capture and commit crimes with impunity. There's no cosmic justice. Sometimes the bad guys win. Sometimes the bad guys get away with it. But what the naturalist atheist can offer is urgency and accountability in the here and now. What do I mean? With the knowledge that life is finite, and in the absence of a cosmic enforcer of justice, there exists a powerful motivation to enact justice in the here and now. We cannot rest on our laurels and abscond our responsibility in the hopes that some invisible other will rectify our problems. If justice is going to be done, it must be done by humanity. In other words, the naturalist atheist position can create a thirst for justice that dwarfs that of theists. For theists can pass the buck. God will sort it. God will hold them to account, so it's okay that we failed. We can rest assured that Savile is burning in hell and so forth. The atheists cannot console themselves with such fantasies. So while Savile's crimes are sickening to behold, and the fact that he was never held accountable a disgrace, at least the atheist can turn this miscarriage of justice into a strong motivator to avoid similar abominations in the future. It's not clear to me that theists can be motivated in the same way. Am I suggesting that theists are incapable of seeking justice? Of course not. That would be absurd. All I'm suggesting here is that the knowledge of our finitude and absence of any cosmic justice are both powerful motivators for justice that theists, by definition, cannot access. So in closing, it's not obvious to me that religion has a monopoly on value, meaning, utility, comfort, and justice. If anything, and depending on the context, faith can get in the way of these things. But what of hope? What can atheism offer in this domain? Some people believe their faith to be indispensable when it comes to contending with grief. They allege that they couldn't deal with grief were it not for their enduring belief and hope that they'll see their loved ones again someday. But without the counterfactual, wherein said individuals are raised without their religious indoctrination, it's hard to take such proclamations seriously. Isn't it possible that such people only think this way precisely because they were raised to believe that the crutch of faith is essential in the first place? But sure, this may be the one area where faith has an edge. However false such claims may be, the faithful derive hope from their belief that they'll see their loved ones again. I would be quick to remind you that the evidence suggests that these hopes are false, but the fact remains that a true believer can derive a sense of hope from their eschatological belief structure. And it follows by definition that naturalist atheism cannot compete in this regard. But does it follow from this that atheism is altogether hopeless? I don't think so. And here's Stephen Woodford of the channel Rationality Rules with a beautiful explanation as to why. Take it away, Stephen. Take it away.
As an atheist, as a naturalist, as the Forsaken, I offer you not the hope of eternal life, but the certainty of this life. I offer you the challenge to make the most out of your brief time in the sun, to create your own meaning, to forge your own path, to cherish the here and now, to leave this world a better place for its own sake, not for your sake. Yes, the religious may have their unique hopes, but we have ours too. We have the hope of a life lived fully, a world understood more deeply, a love experienced more intensely, because we believe this is our only chance. We have the hope of making this one life that we know we have as beautiful, as meaningful, and as fulfilling as it can possibly be, not just for ourselves, but for those that will come to stand on our shoulders. We burn the fuel of our lives for a sunrise that we will never see. That is our sacrifice. That is our legacy. That is our hope. And do you know what? It's enough.
Whatever the case may be, all I can say is that atheism has made my life much more meaningful. As an atheist, I have a zest for life that I never had as a theist. I live each day as if it were my last. So don't buy the hype. Stop granting theists the idea that atheism lacks meaning, utility, comfort, justice, and hope. Resist. Lead by example. Demonstrate to the world that atheism makes life more valuable. In the iconic words of Stephen Fry,
so, atheism is not just about not believing there's a God, but on the assumption that there is one. What kind of God is he? It's perfectly apparent that he is monstrous, utterly monstrous, and deserves no respect whatsoever. The moment you banish him, your life becomes simpler, purer, cleaner, more worth living, in my opinion.
If you got this far in the video, I sincerely appreciate it. Remember, I believe that you only get one life, so the fact that you chose to spend some of your precious moments listening to me matters more than I could ever explain. I'll leave you with a quote from one of my favorite songs. If we were vampires and death was a joke, we'd go out on the sidewalk and smoke, laugh at all the lovers and their plans. I wouldn't feel the need to hold your hand. Maybe time running out is a gift. I'll work hard till the end of my shift, and give you every second I can find, and hope it isn't me who's left behind. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. All the best. Bye bye.